Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So it's been a while since we've been in the studio, Jimmy.
Jack has been injected with the homosexual virus. Very wonderful beginning to the podcast.
I'm just trying to bring some energy, James, because you're so fucking low energy today. It's killing me.
There's no reason that two brothers shouldn't just be able to sit here and have a good old-fashioned low-energy chat.
I'm white.
It ain't easy being white. It ain't easy being brown.
All right. So because it's been so long since we've recorded, neither of us really remember where we were up to. But we definitely know that we did. Why does the church baptize infants?
We know that question has a very special resonance with us.
Why?
Because we think it's the one we're up to.
Because I thought you were going to say because we were both baptized as infants, but sure.
I was baptized as an infant.
So was I.
Yeah.
All right. So then the next question is 259. James, take it away.
Jack, what is required of one who is to be baptized?
Everyone who is to be baptized is required to make a profession of faith. This is done personally in the case of an adult, or by the parents and by the church in the case of infants. Also, the godfather or the godmother and the whole ecclesial community share the responsibility for baptismal preparation, or the catechumenate, as well as for the development and safeguarding of the faith and grace given at baptism.
Is your girlfriend Margot baptized?
She's not baptized.
So we're currently preparing her as a community?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is she planning to be baptized?
She's going through catechesis with Father.
When does she leave the country?
Well, by the time this comes out, it will have happened sometime before.
But I'm saying...
It's 4 weeks from like yesterday or something.
Are they anticipating baptizing her before she leaves the country?
You would have to ask Father that. I'm leaving that up to Father's good.
As a part of our catechetical community for her, we should be on that journey.
Well,
because I imagine there would be a big... Well, we're all in community. I was just trying to talk to her about how we're getting these plates sent off.
Well, hopefully by the time people hear this, they will have got the plates already.
I doubt it.
But who knows?
But that seems like that would be quite a break in the formation to go overseas.
Well, I suspect this is maybe could be something we discuss.
I'm making the general personal.
Yeah, so I mean, like, so you either as a baby,
the whole ecclesial community shares responsibility for baptismal preparation.
Yeah. You're going to be like this all night, aren't you?
I've had the flu.
I don't know what you've got, but you've had it longer than that.
Well, I just think, I mean, I hadn't thought about that. I knew she was catechizing and she was nearing the end.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if we had a date for her coming into the Catholic
As I understand,
life.
there's no date specifically for her baptism. No. Not yet, because things are still being worked out.
Okay.
And they're worked out in her and God's time.
I never understand this thing about God's time.
Are we going to talk about that now?
Well, no, I assume we come to it later.
It's the one time we're not coming back to that.
Yeah, we're not going to get to that.
Oh, all right.
Because we've already kind of done it in God's providence.
That's right. No, I think about the immediate and that, okay, we're doing the catechism in general. Broad brushstrokes for everybody.
Very broad. The broadest.
But there are very narrow brushstrokes for a person that we both know.
Right, but you've
and I don't know the answer as a part of that ecclesial community.
Well, that's not true because your wife was baptized as an adult.
No, but I'm saying about Margot. I know what happened with my wife. She got baptized before we got married. But I'm saying Margot, who I know is leaving, it's like, am I, as her employer, am I leaving her enough time to get baptized?
The answer to that is no, you are not.
Well, then I should arrange for her to have more time with Father and less time. I'm going to take all the plates off her plate.
All right.
She won't let me. I'm fighting her for this work.
So, as a baby, you obviously can't say the profession of faith, so that's why you have somebody to stand in for you.
Yes.
And I think we have talked about this already, where it's like, well, isn't this abusive to have, like, the infant to be baptized?
No, we're good on that.
We've done that. Yeah. So
it's the adults who are flying to America.
So what is required of somebody's baptized? What is required of them is to profess the faith, or by proxy to have professed it.
By proxy to have, yeah.
Yeah.
that profession of faith, a profession of faith.
Yeah. So again, like if
That can change. There are different forms of the profession of faith.
right, so like in danger of death, that
Yep.
that sign or that like exterior sign is you could sort of like limit that, right?
Well, you
'Cause
go to a suburban church on a Sunday, and there's just a couple of dumpy.
they're in danger of a different kind of death, I think. Yeah. But I'm saying, like, if you're on the side of the road and you're bleeding out and the priest rocks up and he's got the holy water and he's going to say, do you want to be baptized? And any sort of indication that you do will be taken as a profession of faith,
I see.
right? Whereas, like, obviously in the normal, ordinary circumstances of the world, it's going to require more of you because the church wants to be sure that you know what you're doing.
As an infant, it requires very little. But on proxy,
Yeah.
we would ask that those proxies.
Well, that they know
Do a
what they're
good
signing
job.
up to, right? Like, that's where the sort of like tension is with, for example, to get to a heated topic, like you've got a homosexual couple, and they have a child, and they want to get it baptized by the church, and there is all sorts of questions about whether or not the church ought to baptize that child because
Well, it depends who their godparents are, though, right?
no, because also like the parents have to agree to raise the child in the faith, right? But
I don't remember being asked to be said anything during my children's baptism.
No, but it's also assumed that by like the priest has already agreed to baptize your child, right? So, and that's the neck that you have to go through, right? Like, so like there's obviously like if you're in an unideal situation like that, or divorce, remarried, or something like that, then it makes it more complicated.
I imagine we just do that all the time.
Well, it doesn't happen. It's not a rubber stamp thing, right? Because obviously then you have to walk with that. You have
Does
to
someone
like
have to go?
pastorally
but
journey with that.
Does that
person.
priest have to go through the bishop for that decision, or any priest?
Oh, any priest can do anything.
So
yeah.
you just find the guy with the rainbow stole.
Well, that might be what happens in the end, yeah. But like, yeah, it's not to say that it's not complicated.
No doubt. And then I know that you've had trouble deciding whether or not to be a godfather. I know several people in the community who have had hard times. Should I be a godfather for this person? I don't feel comfortable entering into that.
Right. I don't want to speak to the specific instance that I think you're talking about.
I'm just talking
because
generally
it's-
because about several people in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there might be times where it's appropriate, where it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously this is an issue where there's some sort of hinterland that we're not going into now.
That's right. Let's not go to the hinterland. Let's just move on to the next question.
Hey, who can baptize?
The ordinary ministers of baptism are the bishop and the priest. In the Latin Church, the deacon also can baptize. In case of necessity, any person can baptize, provided he
talking
has
about.
the intention of doing what the church does. This is done by pouring water on the head of the candidate while saying the Trinitarian formula of baptism, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Anyone can baptize.
Anyone can baptize. That doesn't mean anybody should
This
baptize.
is a licit, valid situation.
It's a licit, valid situation, yeah. So, and that's actually a good point. We should probably talk about that. So the church would say something is valid when it happens. That's what it means when it's saying it's valid. So
if I baptize someone, they are baptized.
they are baptized.
But the church says naughty,
The
naughty.
church-
The church says
the church.
you're naughty,
Hey, the
naughty.
church, we're going to say...
You shouldn't have done that, Jimmy, but we
Yeah.
count it, but non ta 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 ta.
Yeah, so like it's illicit because it's not being done in accordance with the law of the church, right? So it's like it's an illegal baptism, but the baptism has happened. This person is now a Christian.
Yep.
Whether or not they should be a Christian is another question, but they are one. Other times you'll get into this is like, okay, well, a priest who's not got faculties or something
Right.
like that, a priest who's not in good standing with the church, and quite explicitly so, says mass. It's a valid mass. The mass has happened, but he shouldn't have done it.
If you break the Roman law, are there punishments?
There should be punishments, yeah.
But what is there a punishment for an illicit baptism?
Well, I mean, it would be very hard to track, which is why it's
Yeah.
been made, why the church law says you shouldn't do it.
Would that count as a mortal sin to intentionally break the church's law?
Depends on the circumstances, but it could, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, if I'm going around to, like a Muslim orphanage
Yeah.
and baptizing all the children while they're asleep, and then I don't tell anybody, like,
Chosen
this is a
the
mortal
less
sin.
controversial of Abrahamic examples.
I did.
There, haven't you?
I have, quite explicitly. Yes, the Mortara affair is an example of this, where it's
Looms
like
large.
you do something that essentially you shouldn't be doing
Yeah.
because like the person hasn't asked for it or their representatives.
Yep.
But it's happened now. And that is a mortal sin because it's like, well, actually now the church has a
Has
a
to deal
problem
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it gets tricky is like, and this happens all the time, like grandma's really devout. She goes to mass every Sunday, maybe every day, and she loves her grandkids. But her daughter or her son has decided, I'm going to get my kids baptized in the church, and she thinks, but I really want my grandkids to be saved. Oh, they're staying over for a sleepover, and I'm giving them a bath.
Yeah.
Maybe I just say a couple of words.
I think that's obviously fine.
Harder to say. I mean, it's definitely not good. Is it mortal? I don't know, but it's not good. Because that's a valid but illicit baptism.
Definite forgiveness, permission type category.
Well, I mean, that's the attitude they take, but then it becomes a problem because if later they want to become a Christian, they say, "Will you ever baptized?" And they might say, "Well, no."
Give a conditional baptism,
right? But or maybe I do remember grandma doing something weird to me in the bath.
We're having fun with it.
Grandma.
Oh, Sam's back on the effects. Sam's inspired, but. No, I just noticed you pushing a lot of buttons.
All right.
So all of a sudden after you were just slapping that keypad.
So that valid...
Is baptism necessary for salvation?
Baptism is necessary for salvation for all those to whom the gospel has been proclaimed and who have had the possibility of asking for the sacrament. So baptism is the necessary sacrament. All the other sacraments are, in a sense, superfluous to baptism. Baptism's the only one you need.
Under those conditions which are...
Right. If you're a Confucian monk in 13th century China and the gospel has never been proclaimed to you, the conditions of your salvation may be different, extraordinary.
Seems like there's a lot of wiggle room in... Like you're going to take a different view on what have had the possibility of means compared to a Jesuit.
Yeah, I mean, and we've discussed this already,
Yeah.
and my ceiling would be lower for that.
The way of Jack is narrow. It's very narrow.
It's a narrow gate, man.
Heaven is
empty.
empty.
A narrow gate.
Heaven is mostly empty in Jack's conception of the...
It's probably going to be empty of me in my conception, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody here. I'm just saying, it does seem difficult to read.
If I'm not getting in, you're sure as fuck not getting in, you fucking dogs. If I'm definitely going to hell, what chance do you have? Huh?
It seems to me that a sincere reading of the gospel, like Christ does make it quite clear that this is a hard road, and that this is not necessarily for everyone in that. Not everyone will be saved. But we know that even those who are baptized, right? But if you're going to be saved,
many will cry out,
you're going to need
Lord.
baptism.
Many will cry out.
Many will cry out, Lord, Lord.
Excuse me. But is it possible to be saved without baptism? Oh.
Well, again, and we've already sort of talked about this when we talked about salvation outside of the church. Since Christ died for the salvation of all, those can be saved without baptism who die for the faith, which is called a baptism of blood. Catechumens and all those who, even without knowing Christ in the church, still under the impulse of grace, sincerely seek God and strive to do His will, can also be saved without baptism, which is called a baptism of desire. The church in her liturgy entrusts...
runs into trouble.
The church in her liturgy entrusts children who die without baptism to the mercy of God.
Okay.
So there's three things there. Yes. The catechumens.
Again.
Baptism of desire, right?
Yep.
So if you're on the process, on the road to becoming a Catholic, and you die on the way,
Impulsive grace.
the church will say, yeah, okay, you have a baptism of desire, potentially.
The church in her liturgy entrusts children who die without baptism to the mercy of God.
Right. So
we entrust everything to the mercy of God.
I think we should
goldfish and dogs.
I think we should deal with the first two before we deal with the last one. So that's baptism of desire, baptism of blood, which is a martyrdom.
I think we entrust Hitler to the mercy of God.
The baptism of blood, which is a martyrdom. So if you're and this has happened even in recent times, right?
Murder of the innocents.
Well, no, I'm aware of an Islamic guy who was murdered by ISIS, right? Because they asked him, "Do you profess Jesus Christ?" And he said, "Yes, I do."
Issa.
And so they killed him for it. And so the church has said, "Well, this man is a martyr, right?
He died for the faith.
He died for the faith.
Yeah.
He had a baptism of blood." So, and the final point...
Columbine, those kids who were definitely not asked that question, do you believe in God?
Well, we can only hope that we get asked that question.
Do you reckon you can die? You can be baptized in the blood for broad theistic enlightenment?
No, I don't think so. No, it's
if people
quite
are like,
specific.
Do you believe in God? And you say yes.
I believe that there's a watchmaker. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but you don't go into specifics. You're just broadly saying a higher power.
No, because it's specifically Christ.
It has to be Christ.
It has to be Christ. Yeah. And the final one, which is to deal with Yeah, those children who are unbaptized, right? Because this is obviously a problem in this framework.
Limbo.
Right, so there's...
Is this the closest we get to talking about limbo?
It is the closest we get to talking about limbo, yeah. What do you want to talk about limbo?
Well, I'm just saying, for something that we've done a lot of paintings about as a church, more stained glass windows than we know what to do with, peppered across Europe. And then it gets... we're so ashamed of limbo.
So
we barely want to mention it in the Catechism
just
anymore.
for those who don't know, because it's not a doctrine, right? So limbo is a theological speculation that has been around for a long time, particularly through the Middle Ages, where it was proposed that children who die without baptism, because they're not baptized, cannot go to heaven.
Yes.
But because God is just and merciful, also ought not go to hell.
They went to a silly in-between.
They went to a silly in-between place called limbo, or that's how it's like been like described in modern parlance, which I think is like to do it an injustice.
You think you want to describe it as a place of perfect
well,
natural
no, because they're not
happiness?
talking about it in the Middle Ages as limbo, right? They're
What
not
are they-
giving it some like, oh, silly bimbo name.
No, but they're getting Hieronymus Bosch to paint people walking upside down and getting eaten by a sandwich.
Hieronymus Bosch had his own problems. I don't think anybody made him do anything.
He was given a free hand. He lived at a time when they could have stopped him if they wanted to.
So, yeah, limbo is a theological speculation which you're free to believe if you want to, but you're also free to disbelieve if you don't.
So it's just an open question. We don't have a...
We
It's not an easy...
So-
So people are... It seems wrong that someone before the age of reason should be doomed to hell.
Well, I mean, like any child under 7 is before the age of reason, right? But like
Yeah.
even that is like a child who dies, at 5, which is obviously tragic and very sad. Who's
Say a
unbaptized.
miscarriage,
Yeah, but because it seems weirder and
Yeah.
more unjust if the child is never born.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's something about that where it's like they didn't even get out of the womb that seems problematic.
Yeah.
And of course it's all problematic at this point, like under the age of reason. But yeah, so the church would say, well, presuming upon the mercy of God, we don't know, but the church has always celebrated in her liturgy for unbaptized infants a mass where it's like, yeah, we do this thing where we entrust God this to God's mercy.
What's
Like,
this? What's this?
It's called the Mass of the Angels.
Mass of the Angels.
Yeah, it's so you don't have a funeral for an infant who's unbaptized.
You do the Mass of the Angels.
You do the Mass of the Angels.
Okay, I didn't.
Yeah,
But that's not to say that...
because we're not praying for the soul of the child.
That's not to
right?
say that
Like-
an unbaptized infant becomes an angel.
No, we're saying, well,
That
we
would be a very
entrust
strange
the soul of the child to
angelology.
the angels, and we don't know what happens. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's a mystery. And so people get really upset about this for obvious reasons, right? Like women who've had miscarriages and stuff, and it's obviously terrible. It's a fucking terrible thing.
That we don't say they're in heaven now.
It's a fucking terrible thing that they die, but
Yeah.
like we have been given this by Christ for our own good, we believe, right? Baptism, the sacraments, the
Yeah.
church, all this sort of stuff. These are the ordinary means of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
What happens before that or outside of those things, the extraordinary things, we don't really know, right? But we believe in a merciful God.
How long have you got to get that baptism done before?
Well, I mean, traditionally,
It's on
it was
you.
done very quickly.
Yeah.
Like, almost as soon as the child's born.
But it's hard to organise a party.
Yeah, I mean, what's your priority here, right? Like,
You love going to a big baptismal party.
yeah, and most of the baptismal
When the
parties I
wogs
go
get
to,
you over
yeah,
for a
it happens pretty quick.
Barbecue and a bottle of
Hell
red.
yeah, I do. Yeah.
But, yeah. I mean, the woman has to recover. You have a big C-section. It's
No,
hard to also
well, so
ask
there are-
her to organise a
There
party.
are two things there, right? Because traditionally you'd also have the churching of women,
Yeah.
right? Which is like you have the baptism very quickly because the priest comes to your house and does
Yeah.
it, right? Like it's done.
Yeah.
Then you have weeks and weeks afterwards the return of the mother to the church.
Yeah.
And there was a ceremony around that called the churching of women.
I think we should bring that back.
I definitely think we should
I
bring
don't
that
like
back.
this thing of the next
You're back
week.
at mass on Sunday? That's
You
pretty
gotta-
brutal, man.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is
It's
hard.
hard.
But also, like, people do that out of piety. People do that. There's no obligation there.
But what happened during the churching of women?
It's like a welcoming ceremony of,
Yeah, I
of women
know.
back to the church.
What do? Do a little dance?
I mean, you could do a little dance if you want.
Churching of women. I like to think they get little hats.
Of course you do. You like to think everybody gets little hats.
I think little hats are very
That's why
important.
that mate in the comments thought you were going to wear a yarmulke by the end of this.
No, he thought I was going to wear one of the Islamic skull caps.
Oh, right. Sorry. It's the same thing.
I'll get to the Jews in the end, but we all need a little Muslim phase. What would you do in the West? Do you just want to hear the West one?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. The right largely fell into disuse in the late 1960s following the Second Vatican Council, but a number of traditional Catholic women still undergo the rite. Almighty everlasting God, through the delivery of the Blessed Virgin Mary, thou hast turned into joy the pains of the faithful in childbirth. Look mercifully upon this thy handmaid, coming in gladness to thy temple to offer up her thanks, and grant that after this life, by the merits and intercession of the same Blessed Mary, she may merit to arrive, together with her offspring, at the joys and everlasting happiness through Christ our Lord. So you just get a nice little prayer.
Just get a nice little prayer before you come into the church. Yeah.
At the end, yeah. Concluding prayer.
Right.
And it's the order for a blessing of a mother after childbirth, still used. But it was, Vatican II, they phased it out. That's more of spirit of Vatican II rather than something in the documents,
I would say so, yeah. I think that we can move on from that question now, I hope.
It says that the Methodists don't have a way of rechurching women because Methodists don't have sex.
Don't they?
That's just a joke. Why don't Methodists believe in sex before marriage?
Why?
Might lead to dancing. They just go through all the other different churching of women in the East. Boy, I bet they got some funny churches in the East.
Anyways, let's keep going.
I was reading about the Eastern Orthodox in my constant reading about the Eastern Orthodox, and there's this guy who's like not a priest, but it's sort of part of the ecclesial hierarchy, and he just has a stick and chants and like sings a song, and it's not quite a deacon.
He would be a minor order. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're like, some people go, he's not a minor order. This is just like a folk thing that has popped up parallel. But then it's like this long description, and then just the final line on Wikipedia was like, villagers are very afraid of this man.
We need the man with it. We need to return to tradition. Bring back the man with the stick.
I love Coptic Orthodox thing.
I know you do, James. Can we please just stop?
Christ is one nature.
It's a heresy, James. You're a heretic.
We love our Ethiopian Orthodox brothers.
We do.
Yeah.
We don't love their heresy.
Chalcedonian and non-Chalcedonian alike, we're all Christian.
And some of us are heretics, and some of us aren't.
What is nature?
Please, can we keep going with baptism? We've already done Christological heresies.
Okay. What are the effects of baptism?
Baptism takes away original sin, all personal sins, and all punishment due to sin. It makes the baptized person a participant in the divine life of the Trinity through sanctifying grace, the grace of justification, which incorporates one into Christ and into his church. It gives one a share in the priesthood of Christ and provides the basis for communion with all Christians. It bestows the theological virtues and the gifts of the Holy Spirit. A baptized person belongs to Christ forever. He is marked with the indelible seal of Christ or character, which I can't remember if we did in the last episode when we talked to Father Oleg about it. But the ontological change.
Yes, I believe we have spoken a great deal
marks
about ontological change.
So yeah, there's a couple of very important things there. So baptism, like it wipes away original sin.
Yep.
All personal sins, so anything you've done, like if you're an adult, like at the age of reason, that's bad, gets wiped away as well. All punishment due to sin, so if you get baptized on your deathbed, you're pretty good. It makes the baptized person a participant of the divine life, so we enter into the inner life of the Trinity by being incorporated in Christ's body.
Yes.
We become part of the church. We are given the theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity.
Yes.
And we're given the gifts of the Holy Spirit, which I'm not going to list.
I mean,
because I don't know them.
And this is the normative means by which these things are given, because obviously people had a concept of things like faith, hope, and charity separate to being baptized.
Yes, but like, and I think we may have talked about this already, or we may talk about it later when we do the virtues. But faith, hope, and charity are distinctly Christian virtues that are only given to us in baptism. So even if, like, you can say that somebody has, like, is responding to the call of faith before baptism by seeking it, but they're actually only given the virtue of faith, which is a habit that they perform in baptism. And I think we will talk about this more in depth when we do the virtues. Yeah. Which is after the sacraments.
I think that's a very controversial point.
Well, it's not a controversial point. It's all a matter of definitions.
I think that's going to require a definition of a lot of those words that people won't recognise at first blush.
It won't, because I don't think you're understanding what the Catechism is saying. Which is that there are human virtues, of course, right? Like
Yeah.
prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude are natural to everyone and can be exercised by anyone. They don't need to be given to you.
Yes.
But faith, hope, and charity, in the way that Paul talks about them, can only be given to you by God directly through baptism.
There are just so many hopeful people out in the world.
Because we're not talking about hope as in like optimism.
Okay.
We're talking about hope as in like the hope of the resurrection, right? Which is a virtue that can only be built up by it being received as a gift.
That without baptism a person couldn't have.
Well, because it's like the same thing as saying like, okay, so like I could say I love my girlfriend,
Yes,
right?
you could.
Which, you know, like and to a certain degree, I can say that very truthfully. But what I can't...
Do you talk to her like that?
No, so what I'm saying is, like it's...
Excuse me. Edit me saying
There's obviously a way in which when you say you love your wife,
yeah.
that's more meaningful than like some unmarried people saying that they love each other to each other, right? Because you're doing the thing, right? Like you've
Yeah.
already given each other the gift, which is love,
Yeah.
which is a permanent fixture in your
Yeah.
life because of your marriage. And now it's like, well, when you say you love your wife, it actually means and matters more than when somebody who's unmarried says it. And it's not about your feels, right? You're not saying like, oh, I have this feeling of affection for this person. You're saying like, I have this act of charity that I'm constantly exercising towards this person and vice versa.
What you're describing is correct. But, I mean, there are ways, you know, we'll get to that in the virtue. We'll have that stash. I don't want to get too far off the beaten track.
That's very unusual, James.
Jimmy doing a we'll get to that.
We'll
No,
get
no,
to
but
that,
I-
Jimmy.
I just-
Hey.
I want to get that.
But James, what if we don't?
Well, it's just so transparently. It seems like a series of very silly things to say.
No, well, okay, but you agree with what I just said.
I mean, yeah, to some extent, the relationship you have in marriage as indissoluble. When I say I love my wife, and there is it's hard to get out of it, right?
Murder, well, basically.
Yeah.
You have to murder her. Or she you.
Even just the extent to which I would say even in a secular capacity, even a secular understanding of marriage.
We have no-fault divorce.
The way, but our finances
It's literally
are all
called
tied up.
no-fault divorce.
We've got children that we have to
Whose fault is it? It's nobody's fault.
talk to.
We just stop loving each other.
Well, people do, but we have to figure out the money.
No, people
and
stop having the
kids
affection
and
for
the
each other.
house. Well, again, this is an understanding of love that is very specific to.
To Catholicism,
Yeah.
because it's a more robust understanding of love.
Well, it's to take one of the Greek forms of love and
Agape.
Yeah.
To will the good of the other.
But if someone was to say, I do not experience eros for my spouse anymore,
Yeah.
that's a form of love, and it would be true of them to say it.
Right, but because like the love that you're engaging in a marriage is not only eros, right? Like
I'm not disagreeing with this. Jack,
Like, you
over the
could be
last few
viciously
weeks,
malformed
has
by
become.
a-
This is part of the reason I'm waiting to get to it. Is that Jack's gotten much worse at arguing. He needs it more now than he did before, and he goes to weird, dark places and jumps on any scrap that he can get, and he latches on like a hungry dog.
James, I've been
cautious.
rewatching the last
I'm
like the
cautious.
first like 10 episodes of our
Yeah.
podcast, and I don't think it's fair to say that I'm the argumentative one.
I think
so far.
you've become less reasonable. I think as you go on and watch more of them, you'll go, what happens to me?
We'll see, won't we?
Yeah.
One of us is going to look very silly.
Yes, they will.
What is it that you're disagreeing with, though, James? I don't even understand.
No, I'm just...
All I said was the thing that the Catechism
funny.
is saying, and you're saying you're being
what-
so unreasonable.
No, I didn't. But it's not quite what I said, though, is it? Again, it's a series of facsimiles and
All right, well,
feints.
perhaps we should move on to the next
Dodging
question.
to the
then, James.
left, weaving to the right.
If I'm being so difficult, then we should move on to the next question.
He argues like a woman now. Now it's all the arguments you have with your woman, and you argue you've learnt the ways of thine oppressor. Well, I guess if I'm being difficult, maybe we should move on.
What do you want me to say here, James?
I'm sorry.
I'm not going to say that because I haven't done anything wrong.
Just like a woman. Hey, Jackie. What is the meaning of the Christian name received at baptism?
The name is important because God knows each of us by name. That is in our uniqueness as persons. In baptism, a Christian receives his or her own name in the church. It should preferably be the name of a saint who might offer the baptized a model of sanctity and an assurance of his or her intercession before God.
Who'd you get?
I was actually baptized Jack.
You didn't at your confirmation. Oh, this is as opposed to your confirmation name.
Your Christian. That's why it's called the Christian name, right?
Yeah.
So you would have been baptized James.
Yes, one of my children. There is no, I don't believe, saint of that name. But
Not yet.
Hey,
Hey.
well, there are some variants that there are saints, but
There must be. I'm going to look
you'd
into
be
that.
shocked.
Yeah, right.
You'd be shocked. In baptism, Christian receives his or her own name in the church, preferably be the name of a saint.
Yes. So, the church, if your name is Khaleesi or something,
Yeah.
right, and you bring your baby to the church, ideally the priest would say,
Did you watch the last season?
this is not a real name. Yeah, don't, maybe
But
choose
doesn't that
a
artificially limit the
different-
number of names?
Yeah, this is yeah.
And doesn't
it
it
does,
also-
which is why when you
it takes
meet
people
old
away
Catholic
from their
families, it's like
cultures.
Michael, Helen.
But when you're in Sudan, this is Mpopo.
there are plenty
his
of
son,
Sudanese saints, man.
Jimmy.
Don't worry.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, but somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago, actually, don't you think it's really weird that all the apostles had white men names?
Yeah.
And you're like, where did the white people get it from?
They're all Jewish names.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we baptized all the Irish and all the English and stuff baptized their children in the names of.
And when you go
the
back and you read
apostles.
a traditional
And now it seems
Irish
silly.
name, it's like
Yeah, exactly. And now people think it's silly that are they just white people names? It's like, no, these are Hebrew names.
Yeah, it just shows once again that we've been colonized.
We have been colonized by
Yeah.
Christ and his church.
One of his churches.
Yes, you're right, James. I am the argumentative one.
And did those feet in ancient times.
Sam, how long have we been going for?
32.
I think that's the episode.
32.
That's that episode.
Yeah, we finished baptism. That could be baptism 1 and 2. I'm so sick of James that we're going to finish it there, and we'll.
Let's do another.
Yeah, we'll do another one. All
Can
right,
we edit
thank you.
out that thing that I said immediately?
Yeah, we
Because I feel bad about that one. That's the only one I felt bad about ever.